Inform Nation, welcome in to the Inform Fitness Podcast. 20 minutes with New York Times bestselling author Adam Zickerman and friends. Except in this episode. I'm Tim Edwards with the Inbound Podcasting Network and a client of Inform Fitness. This episode runs about the length of 4 of our regular episodes. Why? Well, Sheila and I took this episode off so Adam and Mike could spend some extra time with author Bill DeSimone. Bill penned the book Congruent Exercise, How to Make Weight Training Easier on Your Joints. Bill, of course, is also a personal trainer and a weightlifter himself, and he's well known for his approach to weightlifting, which focuses on correct biomechanics to build strength without undue collateral damage to connective tissue and the rest of the body. So whether you're an aspiring trainer, a serious weightlifter, or even an Inform Fitness client who invests just 20 to 30 minutes a week at one of their 7 locations, this episode is chock full of valuable information regarding safety in your high-intensity strength training, a paramount platform of which the Power of 10 resides at all Inform Fitness locations across the country. Okay, this episode is long enough without me jabbering away, so let's get to it. Here's Mike Rogers, Adam Zickerman, and Bill DeSimone with Congruent Exercise, How to Make Weight Training Easier on Your Joints.
So there's not a day that goes by, I don't think, by the way, that I don't think of something Bill has said to me when I'm training people. Bill is basically my reference guide. He's my Grey's Anatomy. When I try an exercise with somebody, I often find myself asking myself, what would Bill do? and I take it from there. So without further ado, this is Bill. We're going to talk about all good stuff. Joint-friendly exercise is what Bill calls it now.
Yes.
You started out with Congruent Exercise, a technical manual for joint-friendly exercise. And now you're rephrasing it.
Well, actually, the first thing I did was moment arm exercise.
Right.
But the thing is, I didn't write moment arm exercise with the idea that anybody other than me was going to read it. I was just getting my own ideas down, taking my own notes, and just to flesh it out and to tie it up in a nice package, I actually wrote it and had it bound up and sent it off to, I guess, Greg Anderson and McGuff and a couple others. And it hit a wave of interest.
A wave? They probably were blown away.
Yeah, well, a lot of those guys went out of their way to call me to say, gee, a lot of what I suspected you explained here. But anyway, but when I read it now, it's pretty technical. It's pretty... It's a challenge.
There's a lot of, I think, common sense with an experienced trainer when you think about levers in general. And I think what you did in that manual was make it very succinct and very clear. I think it's something that maybe we didn't have the full story on, but I think we had some. Like if you have some experience and you care about safety as a trainer, I think you were kind of looking at it and you saw it observationally. And then I think when we read this, we were like, finally, this is crystallized what I think some of us were really
crystallized.
thinking.
So you know what? I just realized let's explain first and foremost. You wrote something called moment arm exercise.
Yes.
So the name itself shows you how technical it probably is inside, right? So
That's
a
right.
moment arm is a very technical term, very specific term in physics. But then now you're calling it joint-friendly exercise. So and you called it also congruent exercise at one point. All synonymous with each other. So please explain, what is joint-friendly exercise or fitness?
It's based more on anatomy and biomechanics than sports performance. So unlike, a lot of the fitness fads that the attitude and the verbiage comes out of, say, football practice or a competitive sport, what I'm doing is I'm filtering all my exercise instruction through the anatomy and biomechanics books to try to avoid putting the joints in vulnerable positions. And that's so complicated, which is why I struggle so much to make it clearer. So I started with moment arm exercise, and then I wrote congruent exercise, which was a little broader, but obviously the title still requires some explanation. And then, now as it happened in my personal training in the studio, I would use all this stuff, but I wouldn't explain it because I was only dealing with clients. I wasn't dealing with peers since it's a private studio, not a big gym, I don't have to explain the difference between what I'm doing and what somebody else is doing. But in effect, I've been doing this every day for 15 years.
You know, I have to say, when you say that you didn't explain to clients, I actually use this information as a selling point. I actually explain to my clients why we're doing it this way as opposed to the conventional way, because this is joint friendly. I don't get too technical necessarily, but I let them know there is a difference of why we're doing it this way versus the conventional way. So they understand that we actually are cut above everybody else in how we apply exercise. So they don't feel, so they feel very secure in the fact that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I digress.
Well, but you know what I do is any signage I have, business card, website, Facebook presence, all lays out joint friendly and defines it and kind of explains it. So I would say most of the clients I have aren't coming from being heavily engaged in another form of fitness. They're people who start and drop out of programs, or they join a health club in January and drop out. It's not like I'm getting somebody who is like really intensely into CrossFit or intensely into Zumba or bodybuilding, and now they're banged up and now they need to do something different. The joint friendly phrasing is what connects me with people that need that. I just find they don't need the technical explanation as to why we're not overstretching the joint capsule in the shoulder.
Of course.
Why we're not getting that extra range of motion on the bench press. Because again, there's nobody. They haven't seen anybody doing otherwise. So I don't have to explain why I'm doing it this way.
Yeah, but they might have had experience doing it themselves. Just take an overhead press, for example. Having your arms externally rotated and abducted versus having them in front of you.
Yeah.
There's an easy explanation, right, to a client why we won't do one versus the other.
But I have to say, I do not get people who even know what a behind the neck press is. Now in Manhattan it's a little different. I guess it's more dense.
So for this conversation, let's assume some people know what an overhead press is.
Okay.
And they understand in a way what the conventional is, but we can kind of get into it. What is conventional and what's not conventional? So so it's joint friendly. So how is it joint friendly? What are you actually doing to make it joint friendly?
Well, what I do, the short answer is I use a lot less range of motion than we got accustomed to when we used to use an extreme range of motion. Thinking that if bodybuilders in the 60s were doing pumping motions, and then you want to expand that range of motion for a good reason, and then that gets bastardized, and now we take more of a range of motion and we turn it into an extreme range of motion. Just because going from partial motions to a normal range of motion was good doesn't make a normal range of motion to an extreme range of motion better.
So what's wrong with extreme range of motion?
Well, because
don't you want to improve? They'll say that you want to improve flexibility.
And so the HIIT guys who would say you're going to improve flexibility by loading. The
HIIT guys means the high intensity training sect of our business.
So the line about you're going to use the extreme range of motion with a weight training exercise to increase flexibility. Well, first of all, either flexibility is important or it's not. And that's one of those things where HIIT has a little bit of an inconsistency in that they'll argue that it's not important, and then they'll argue, but you can get it with the weights. That's number one. Number two, a lot of the joint positions that machines and conventional free weight exercise put us in or can put us in are very vulnerable to the joints. And if you go to an anatomy and a biomechanics textbook, that is painfully obvious what those vulnerable positions are. And just because we walk into a gym or a studio and call it exercise instead of manual labor, or instead of
that's what I say.
instead of calling it submission wrestling and putting our joints or an opponent's joints in an externally rotated, abducted, and extended position, if we call it a pec fly, it's still the same shoulder. It's still a vulnerable position, whether it's a pec fly stretching you back there or a jiu-jitsu guy putting you in a paintbrush. But I don't know, from most of the pop fitness books, though, if anybody else is really looking at this. Certainly not in pop fitness. Maybe Tom Purvis.
What's pop fitness?
Well, I mean, if you walk into a bookstore and look in the fitness section, for instance, any of those types of,
the best-selling books.
No offense, celebrity books, glossy celebrity fitness books. But I don't know that anybody, and the feedback I've gotten from experienced guys like Winnett or guys we know personally, is even McGuff said, "Gee, I never associated the joint stuff with the exercise stuff."
Let's talk about these vulnerabilities that you're talking about, and extremes of range of motion, right? So you have to understand a little bit about muscle anatomy to understand what we mean by the dangers of these extreme ranges of motion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so muscles are weaker in certain positions and they're stronger in other positions. Maybe talk about that, because that's where you start getting into why we do what we do, like understanding that muscles don't generate the same amount of force through a range of motion. They have different torque potentials.
Yeah.
And is there like a very clear and concise way of communicating that to a lay person too? I mean, we have practice at it, but I think that's and here we're over the radio or over the podcast, so it's like describing pictures with words.
The easiest way to show it to a client who may not understand what muscle torque is to have him lock out in an exercise. Let's take a safe exercise, a barbell curl, where clearly if you allow your elbows to come forward and be vertically under the weight at the top of the repetition, clearly all of a sudden the effort's gone. There's no resistance. But if you let your elbows drop back to rib height, if you pin your elbows to your sides through the whole curl, now all of a sudden your effort feels even. Instead of having effort and then a lockout,
get lighter, right?
Or having a sticking point
yeah.
and a lockout. Now it just feels like effort.
Or a chest press where your elbows are straight and the weight's just sitting on those elbows. You're not really working too hard there either.
Same thing, right? If you have a lockout, so what's easy to demonstrate is when the resistance torque that the machine or exercise provides doesn't match your muscle torque. So if your muscle torque pattern changes in the course of a movement, if you feel a lockout or a sticking point, then it's not aligned. If all you feel is effort, now it matches pretty evenly. Now here's the thing. All that really means, and part of why I got away from moment arm, all that really means is that set's going to be very efficient. So like, for instance, the whole length of the repetition you're working. It's not like you work and then lock out and rest. All that means is it's going to be a very efficient set. You can't change your muscle torque curve. So if you were to do some kind of weird angled exercise, you wouldn't get stronger in that angle. All you would do is use a relatively lower weight. Like if nobody does in like a Scott bench curl, nobody curls more than a standing curl. You can't change the muscle torque curve. You might change the angle, which means the amount of weight in your hand has to change to accommodate the different torque at that joint angle. But you're not changing where you're strongest. If you could, you would never know you had a bad cam, right? Because if your muscle torque pattern could change with a good cam, it would also change with a bad cam, and then you would never know. But take a dumbbell side raise. Everybody on the planet knows it's hardest when your arms are horizontal. See? Your muscle torque curve can never change to accommodate what the resistance is asking. Now, if you go from a machine side raise, which has more even, like where those two curves match, that set feels harder because you don't have the break. Okay, so you do a set of side raises with dumbbells to failure. If it's a difficulty level of 10, of 4, say out of 10, and then you go to a machine side raise and go to failure, it's like a 10 because you didn't have that break built into the actual rep. When it comes to so the moment arms, knowing how to match the resistance required by the exercise and the muscle torque expressed by your limbs, that makes for a more efficient exercise. In terms of safety, it's all about knowing what the vulnerable positions of the joints are and cutting the exercise short so that you're not loading the joint into an impingement or into like an overstretched position.
How different are these? Or like I'm thinking about limitations and range of motion. I mean, we mentioned that before, and I think it's kind of adjacent to what you're talking about. Is because we also want to, help people understand if they're on their own exercising, or other trainers who want to help their clients, and for our trainers to help our clients. Troubleshooting, we know generally how the joints work, where they're strong, where the strength curves exist, but how to discern where those limitations are. Like, you said before that one of the things that you do is you limit range of motion, and get much more stimulus of the muscle.
I'm saying limit range of motion because that might be the verbiage that we understand and maybe the listeners would understand. Mm-hmm. But it's really a lot more complicated than just saying use this range of motion. So, for instance, in a low back exercise, say a stiff-legged deadlift, which when I used to misinterpret that by using a full range of motion, I would be standing on a bench with a barbell, and the barbell would be at shoe level. My knees would be locked, my lower back would be rounded, my shoulders would be up by my ears as I'm trying to get the bar off the ground. And so, yes, I was using a full range of motion.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It gave me pain for the description.
That's also pretty much of a disaster on your lower back waiting to happen, at least on your lower back. And
I got to go to a chiropractor just listening to that.
Exactly. Yeah, but you still see it all the time. You see it all the time when people are using kettlebells. You see that exact posture, right? The kettlebell is between their legs, their knees are locked, their lower back is rounded, and then now they're doing a speed. At least I was doing them slow. They're doing speed deadlifts. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to do an exercise like that, it wouldn't be an extreme range of motion. I'd be looking to use a correct range of motion. So, for instance, I wouldn't lock the knees, and I would only lower the person's torso so that they could keep the curve in the lower back, right? Which might require a rep or two to see where that is. But once you see where that is, that's what I would limit them to.
Do you do it with no weight at first with the client?
That would be one way of lining it up.
Sort of seeing what they can do just by make sure they understand the position and stuff.
So, for instance, the chest press machine I have in the studio is a Nitro, and
Nautilus Nitro,
and it doesn't. The seat doesn't adjust enough for my preference. So the person's elbows come too far back. So, for instance, to get the first rep off the ground, the person's elbows have to come way behind the plane of their back, which...
So you pin the weight stack then?
I've come to you could pin the weight stack, right?
It's like our pullover, like, how we have to pull it over, at that point,
Yeah, so what I'll do is, like, I'll help the person out of the first repetition, help them out of the bottom, and then I'll have either my hand or the clipboard where... I want their elbow to stop. So as soon as they touch my hand and my elbow, they begin the rep the other way.
So they're not stretching their pecs too far.
Well, they're not. More specifically, they're not stretching
the
far.
rotator cuff muscle.
The shoulder capsule, right? Yeah. So that's another thing we tend to do is we tend to think of everything in terms of the big superficial muscles, right? Because
those are the ones that rarely get hurt, right? It's the rotator
right. Those
cuff.
are the ones that don't get hurt. It's the joints that was one thing of all the stuff I read, whether it was CSCS or Darden stuff or Jones's stuff. There was always a little murkiness between what was the joint and what was the muscle. And that stuff was always written from the point of view of the muscle, right?
What's a joint capsule? For those that don't know what a joint capsule is, a shoulder capsule.
Well, it's part of the structure of what holds your shoulder together. And so if the old Nautilus machines, 1980 vintage, that bragged about getting such an extreme range of motion, some of them it really took your shoulder to the limit of where it could go to start the exercise, and we were encouraged to go that far.
And what would happen?
Eventually, it just adds to the wear and tear that you were going to have in your shoulder anyway, and that's if people stayed with it. I think a lot of people ended up dropping out.
Oftentimes exacerbating what was going on.
Yeah, you rarely see. I mean, it's occasional. We have that catastrophic event in the gym.
That's occasional. Almost never happens.
And a lot of the grief I take from my material is, well, that never happens. People do this exercise all the time. They never explode their spine. Well, A, that's not true. They do, just not in that person's awareness.
Right, at that moment.
And B, but the real problem is unnecessarily adding to life's wear and tear on your joints. So it's not just what we do in a gym that counts. If somebody plays tennis or somebody has a
desk job,
a desk job or a manual labor job, and they're constant. Let's say a plumber or some other manual labor guy has to go over his head with his arms a lot. That wear and tear on his shoulder counts. And just because they walk into your gym and you ask them on a health history, you have any orthopedic problems, they say no. Yes, I'm on the verge of an orthopedic problem that I don't know about, and I've worn this joint out because of work, but no, I have no orthopedic problems at the moment. So, my thing is, the exercise I'm prescribing isn't going to make that worse.
Well, you don't want it to make it worse. And that's why you're limiting range of motion. That's why you're matching the strength curve of the muscle with the resistance curve of the tool you're using, whether it be a free weight or a machine with a cam. Right.
Because again, we're supposed to be doing this for the benefits of exercise. Like I truly do not understand crippling yourself over the magic benefit of exercise. I mean, there's no, in 2014, there was a lot of negative publicity about CrossFit with some of the really catastrophic injuries coming about. Mm-hmm. There's no magic benefits just because you risk your life. You either benefit from exercise or you don't, but you don't get extra magic benefit because you push something to the brink of, cracking your spine or tearing your shoulder apart. So,
well, they talk about them being functional or natural movements that they do encourage these full ranges of motion because that's what you do in life, right? So doing
where?
Like in sports, for example, there's you're extending your body into a range of, and also there are things in life, like for example, I was saying to Adam, for example, sometimes you have to lift something that's heavy, and you have to reach over a boundary in front of you.
Like you're putting it in the trunk of a car, for instance.
So things like that, or even
so shouldn't you exercise that way if that's what you're doing in everyday life?
If your daily life does involve occasional extreme ranges of motion, that's the reason why your joints are kind of wearing and tearing anyway. Is there something you can do to assist in training that without hurting it, or exacerbating it?
See, what's interesting is 25 years ago, there was a movement in physical therapy, and they would have back schools. And it was sort of like an occupational-oriented thing where they would teach you how to lift. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I thought that was so frivolous. I just thought, get stronger. But lifting it right in the first place is really the first step to not getting injured.
Right, don't lift that into the trunk unless you have...
unless you have to, right? I mean, but for instance... practicing bad movements doesn't make you invulnerable to the bad movements. You're just wearing out your free passes.
Right.
Now, sport is a different animal, right? Yes, you're going to be... I don't think anyone's doing this, but there's enough wear and tear just in your sport, whether it's football, martial arts, running. Why add more wear and tear from your workout that's there to support the sport? The original Nautilus marketing pitch was, look how efficient we made weight training. You can spend more time practicing. Mm-hmm. You don't have to spend 4 hours a day in the gym. You can spend a half hour twice a week, 3 times a week in the gym, and get back practicing.
Honestly,
I remember Greg Anderson said to a basketball coach that if his team is in his gym more than 20 minutes or so a week, that he's turning them into weightlifters, not basketball players.
Well, there you go. Now,
I mean, the injury, the thing is the training and the performance goals and the technology and getting people stronger, faster, all that kind of stuff is unbelievable nowadays, but I've never seen more injuries in sports in my entire life than right now.
It's unbelievable. Bogus is what it is, though.
Yeah,
I mean, just this year, right? A lot of pec tears in NFL training rooms, right?
Unbelievable.
So why aren't they learning? Why is this so hard to get across?
Because for starters, you're going to churn out. First of all, you're dealing with 20-year-olds, right? They can tolerate almost anything.
What? So what are you saying about 20-year-olds?
They're a lot more. I was a lot more invincible at 20 than I am at 60.
Oh, so 20,
physically and psychologically,
like they're invincible.
Absolutely. But the other thing, for instance, let's say at college level.
Screw those 20-year-olds.
This is not my experience. I'm repeating this, but if you have a weight room that's empty, and you're the strength and conditioning coach, because you're intensely working people out briefly every day. The rest of the time, they're idle. They're off doing their own thing. Or every day, the administrators and the coaches see people running hoops and doing agility drills and running with parachutes on, and every day there's activity going. What looks better? What is more job security for that strength and conditioning coach? So
It all comes down to economics.
you have that.
Wait a second. What is Jim, the strength training coach, doing? He's working 1 day a week with the team, and what is he
Exactly.
doing the rest of the week?
And what's the team doing the rest of the week?
What's the team?
So,
Wait a second.
but again, also don't forget, again, if you're talking about 20-something-year-old athletes, they're going to tolerate it. I mean, who knows what that's going to bring on later? So for instance, one of the
We are seeing more injuries, though.
and you are seeing more injuries, right? A couple of years ago, ESPN had a story on a guy. He had gotten injured doing a barbell step-up. So a barbell step-up, you put a barbell on your back, you step onto a bench, bring the other foot up, step back off the bench, 4 repetitions. Okay? Classic sports conditioning exercise. Mm-hmm. In this guy's case, either he stepped back and twisted his ankle and fell with the bar on his back, or when he went to turn to put the bar back in the rack, when he turned, it spun on him, and he damaged his back that way. Either way, he put his ability to walk at risk. So the ESPN story was, oh, look how great this is, he's back to playing. Yes, but he put his ability to walk at risk. To do an exercise that is really not significantly, it's more dangerous than other ways of working the legs. It's not better.
Like, they don't have, like the coaches here, the physical trainers, they don't have evidence that doing step-ups is any more effective
Not at all.
in the performance of their sport, or even in their just pure strength gains, than, let's say, doing a safe version of a leg press or even squats, for that matter.
And even if you wanted to go for more of an endurance thing, right? Running stadium steps was a classic exercise, right? But stadium steps were what, 3 or 4 inches? They made them very flat. Mm-hmm. Even that's safer because there's no bar on your back.
Right.
So in the barbell step up, which I think is still currently in the NSCA textbooks, right? The bar's on your back. If the bench is too high, you have to bend over in order to get your center of gravity over the bench. Otherwise, you can't get off the floor. So now you're bent over with 1 foot in front of you, right? So now you don't even have 2 feet under you like in a barbell squat to be more stable. You have your feet in line with the weight extending sideways. And now you do your 20 repetitions or whatever, and you're on top of the bench, and your legs are burning, and you're breathing heavy. And now you got to get off. How do you get off that bench when your legs are gassed? You're going to break the lock in your knee, and the floor is going to come up, and nobody steps forward. They all step backward where you can't see. It's a
Disaster
even
waiting to happen.
even after doing an exercise, let's say you did it okay, whatever, and whether it was congruent or not congruent. Sometimes if it's like a free weight type of thing, like just getting the weight back, on the floor or on the rack is such a, after
Right.
you've gone to muscle failure or close
So
to
are these
muscle
things
failure.
common now still in the NFL? They're doing these kind of training techniques?
I don't really know what's happening in the NFL or in the college level, because frankly I stopped my NSCA membership because I couldn't use any of the material with my population anyway. So I don't really know what they're. I do know that was a classic one, and as recently as say 2014, in fact one other athlete actually did lose his ability to walk, getting injured in that exercise.
I know like
It's
one of my
cost benefit, right? I mean, like, how much more benefit are you getting? I mean, do
Well,
they really
but-
feel they're getting some huge
But it's just
benefit?
cost. See, my point is the benefit is there. It's either or.
Well,
Either you
the
get
thing is,
benefit-
people don't know it though. They think the benefit is there. That's the
Yes.
problem.
The additional
They
benefit for doing
think-
it that way.
They think there's for double the risk, you're going to get quadruple the benefit. What? What benefit?
Yeah, I know.
What
We
magic
see it.
benefits comes out of risking your putting your ability to walk at risk?
One of my clients had a daughter who was recruited to row at Lehigh, which is a really good school for that. And she, in the training program, she was recruited to go. She was a great student, but she was recruited to row. And in the training program, she hurt her back, like doing in the weight room in the fall, and never ever was with the team. And this is a very, very good program.
Okay, very good program.
Yeah.
So it's rowing,
reputation.
So A, it's rough on your lower back, period.
Yeah.
And B, I'm completely guessing here, but at one time they used to have their athletes doing cleans and other things to
Explain a
strengthen.
clean. Explain what a clean is.
Barbell's on the floor, and you either you pull it straight up and squat under the bar, which would be like an Olympic clean,
Goes over the head.
or you're a little more upright and you just sort of drag the bar up to your collarbones and get your elbows underneath it. Either way, it's hard on the back. But at one time, rowing conditioning featured a lot of exercises like that to get their back stronger, that they're already wearing out in the boat. They didn't ask me, but if I was coaching them, I would not train their lower backs in the off season. I would let the rowing take care of that. I would train everything around their back and give their back a break. But they didn't ask.
They didn't ask. I don't know why they didn't ask you. Didn't they know you wrote Congruent Exercise?
That's you know what? You got to go to the receptive audience.
Yeah, I think because there are things that we do in our lives that are occasionally outside our range of motion, or they're just incongruent or not joint friendly, whether it's in sports or not. The thing is, I'm wondering, are there exercises that go, like, for example, say like you have to go, your sport asks for range of motion from 1 to 10, okay? And you need to be prepared to do that, whatever, or if you want to do it, the person desires to do that. Are there exercises that where you go, can you be more prepared for that movement if you are doing it with a load or just a body weight load, whatever, up to say level 4? Is that like, are there situations where it's okay to do that, where you're going a slight increase into that range where it's not compromising joint safety and it's getting you a little bit more prepared to handle something that's going on, if you have to.
So, for
overextend.
example, if for a golf swing, so when you do a golf swing, you're torquing the back more than you probably should in a safe range of motion in exercise, right? I would never torque somebody's back in the exercise room to the level that you have to torque your back to play golf.
Right.
So I guess what Mike's asking is there an exercise that would be safe to torque the back almost as much as you'd have to in golf?
I would say no. I would say, and golf's a good example, right? Now, if you notice, nobody has their feet planted and tries to swing with their upper body.
Right. Well, a lot of people do. Those are that's how you hurt yourself very quickly.
Say, well, right. but just about but any sport, tennis, throwing a baseball, throwing a punch, get your hips into it. It's like a standard coaching cliche, get your hips into it, right? Because what that does is it keeps you from twisting your back too much. In golf, even a Tiger, right, who was in shape for quite a while, couldn't help but over twist, and then he's out for quite a while with back problems, right?
Yeah, I mean his story is really interesting and complicated. He got into like Navy SEAL training, and also you should see the ESPN article on that, which really I think was based on. After I read that, I thought that was the big thing with his problems. Going what you just said about putting your hips into it, I'm a golfer. I try to play golf, and I did the TPI certification. You're familiar with that?
Titleist.
It was I thought it was really wonderful. I felt like I learned a lot. It wasn't like the gospel according to the world of biomechanics, but I thought it was a big step in the right direction with helping with sports performance and understanding strength and mobility, and one of the basis of the foundations of it, they put the body, a computer analysis over the body in the best golfers, the ones who do it very, very efficiently, powerfully, and consistently, and they showed what they called was a kinematic sequence, and it's actually very similar, as you said, in all sports, tennis, golf, throwing a punch. There's a sequence where they see the people who do it really, really well, and in a pain-free way. It goes hips first, then torso, then arm, then club in a very measured sequence. Despite a lot of people who have different looking golf swings, like Jim Furyk, Tiger Woods, John Daly, completely different body types, completely different golf swings, but they all have if you look at them on the screen in slow motion with all the sensors all over their body, their kinematic sequence is identical. and it leads to a very powerful and consistent and efficient swing. But if you say like you have limitations, in your mobility between your hips and your lumbar spine, or your lumbar spine and your torso, and it's all kind of going together, like your hips aren't.
Throw the timing off.
It throws timing off, and if you don't have those types of things, very slowly you're probably going to get, or quickly you're going to get to an injury quicker than another person will get to an injury.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the thing is, at the same time, you don't want to stop someone who really wants to be a good golfer. As we have to give the information, and we have to, and this is people have to learn how to, the biomechanics and the swing, the basic swing mechanics of a golf swing, and then there's a fitness element to it all. Are you strong enough? Do you have the range of motion? Is there proper mobility between the segments of your body in order to do this without hurting yourself over time? And if there isn't, how do golf professionals and fitness professionals are struggling? How do I teach you how to do this, even though it's probably going to lead you to an injury down the line anyway? It's a puzzle. But the final question is, what exercise? I guess I'm trying to find. I'm trying to safely help people who have goals with sports performance, and without hurting them.
Well, first of all, anytime you go from exercise, in air quotes, to sports, right? With sports, there's almost an assumption of the risk. Like the person playing golf
good point,
assumes they're going to hurt a rotator cuff or a back, or they at least know it's a possibility, right? And it's just part of the game. A football player knows they could have a knee injury. Maybe now they know they can have a concussion, but they just accept it by stepping on the court or the turf. They walk into our studio, I don't think that expectation, they may expect it also, but I don't think it really belongs there. Like, I don't think you're doing something to prepare for the risky thing. The thing you're doing to prepare for the risky thing shouldn't also be risky. And besides, let them get hurt on that guy's time, not on your time.
Right, it's a good point.
But I'm being a little facetious there. I don't buy the macho bullshit attitude that in order to challenge myself physically, I have to do something so reckless that I could get hurt. That's just simply not necessary. If somebody says, I want to be an Olympic weightlifter, I want to be a power lifter, just like if they want to be a mixed martial artist, well, you're accepting the fact that
there's risk.
That activity is your priority, not your joint health, not your safety. That activity is your priority. And again, nobody in professional sports is asking me, but I would still make the exercise as safe as possible, as safe as possible first, then as vigorous as possible, right? And then let them take that conditioning and apply it to their sport.
Yeah. If a sport requires to have scapular retraction at a certain time in a swing or whatever it is that they're asking for, I don't really think there's a way of, in the exercise room, working on just that scapular retraction. And even if you can, doesn't mean it's going to translate to the biomechanics and the neuro conditioning and the motor skill conditioning required to put it all together.
Yeah, but you can't think that much.
Right.
You can't think
I'm just
that.
Thinking, I'm just thinking once and for all, if strong hips are what's important for this sport, if a strong neck is what's is important for this, if being able to rotate the spine is important, and you need your rotation muscles of the spine, work your spine rotationally, but in a very safe range of motion. Tax those muscles, let them recover and get strong. And so when you do go play your sport, let's say a golf swing, it's watching the videos and perfecting your biomechanics. But there's nothing I think you can do in the gym that is going to help you really coordinate all those skills, because you're trying to isolate a hip abductor or a shoulder retractor.
Well, I was going to say, I think isolating the muscles in the gym is fine because it allows you to control what's happening, right? You don't have too many moving parts. And this is kind of leading up to the conversation on functional training. Which is good, but even if you could do that, I mean, yeah, you might notice like there's if you go to throw a punch, you don't tell yourself, okay, flex the elbow, extend at the shoulder, now flex the shoulder. You don't break down.
You have
the
a
movements.
coach kind of getting your hips into. They
You
call
have
them arm.
broad-
Right.
it's
Right.
broad, gross
There are a
movements.
lot of boxers that didn't make it because they were called arm punchers.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right,
and so at some point you can't train.
And sometimes
it.
you couldn't train.
At some
somebody
point you
not
could
to-
recognize it, like, gee, that guy has good hip movement.
Right.
Let me direct him to this sport.
Right. So I think what Mike's asking is there some kind of exercise you can do to turn an arm puncher? Let's use this as an example. Turn an arm punch into a hip puncher. If you can maybe do something in the
practice,
gym.
though. I think that's.
I think there's a practice part of it. Like going back to the golf swing, one of the things that they were making a big deal out of is, and it goes back to what we even mentioned before, like sitting at a desk and what's going on with our bodies, our backs, our hips, our hamstrings, as a result of the amount of time that most of us in our lives have. Like we're trainers, we're up on our feet all day, but a lot of people are in a seated position all the time, they're hunched over,
shoulders rolled forward,
their lower back is in a rounded
hamstrings
position,
are shortened,
everything and all the concept. What is going on in the body if you're under those conditions? 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, not to mention, every time you sit down in your car, on the train, have a meal, if you're in a fetal position. It's like my point is, they made a big thing at TPI about how we spend, 18 to 20 hours a day in hip flexion. And what's going on, how does that affect your glutes if you're in hip flexion for 20 hours a day? They were discussing a term called reciprocal inhibition, okay, which is you know what I mean by that?
Yeah,
If
the muscle that's contracting, the opposite muscle has to relax.
Exactly.
They can't both be active.
Exactly. And exactly. So if the hip is being flexed, so as the antagonist muscle is the glute, which is being shut off.
Right.
And therefore, because
and then when you go to hip hinge, your glutes aren't strong enough to do the hip hinge, and so you get into a bad swing.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, as I said before,
what are they recommending you do then?
Well, the thing is, they're saying that several different exercises to activate the glutes specifically.
How is that different than just doing a leg press, which will activate?
Well, the thing is, Adam, that's a good question. And the thing is, and it comes back to some of the testimonials of what you do with clients. Oftentimes when you put them on a leg press, they'll say, "I'm not feeling my glutes. I'm only feeling it in my quads." And other people say, "I'm feeling it lots in my glutes. I'm only and my hamstrings and a little bit in my quads."
But if they don't feel it in their glutes, doesn't mean their glutes aren't activated for sure.
Yeah, but the Bill, what do you think?
Bill.
That's it, Bill. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think feel is very overrated in our line of work. The guy can get you to feel something, but it's not you can do a concentration curl, a tricep kickback, or donkey kicks with a cuff, and you'll feel something because you're not because you're making the muscle about to cramp, but that's not necessarily a positive.
Right.
As far as activating the glutes go, if they don't feel on the leg press, I would go to the abductor machine.
Right.
And
okay, whether it's feel is overrated. I mean, that's the thing that, like, as a trainer, like I really want the client to actually really make the connection with the muscle part. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, you have to steer it though. So, for instance, if you put somebody on the abductor machine and they feel the sides of their glutes burn, in that case, the feel matches what you're trying to do. If you have somebody doing these glute bridging exercises where their shoulders are on a chair and their hips are on the ground, their knees are bent, and they're kind of just driving their hips up, that you feel that, but it's irrelevant. It's not. You're feeling it because you're trying to get the glutes to contract at the end of where they're away from their strongest point. You're not taxing the glutes. You're getting a feeling, but it's not really challenging the strength of the glutes. So, I think what happens with a lot of the approaches like you're describing, where they have half a dozen exercises to wake up the glutes or engage or whatever the phrasing.
Activate
the glutes.
Yeah.
Yes, excuse me.
Get your terminology
There's
right.
there's kind of a continuity there, right? So it should be more of a progression rather than all these exercises are valid.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got a hip abductor machine, the progression is there already.
The thing is, it's also, I got to tell you, a big emphasis is, it's been going back to TPI and golf and stuff, is the mobility factor. You know what I'm saying? So it's not. So I think that's the strength is there oftentimes, but there's a mobility issue every once in a while, and I think that is, and if something is, like for example, if you're very, very tight, and if your glutes are supposed to go first, so says TPI through their kinematic sequence, but because you're so tight that it's going together, and therefore, it's causing a whole mess of other things, which might make your club hit the ground first, and then tension in the arms and tension in the back and all sorts of things. I guess I'm thinking maybe there are other points. Maybe the mobility thing has to be addressed in relation to a golf swing more so than are the glutes actually working or not.
Well, the answer is it all could be. So getting back to a broader point, the way we train people takes a half hour twice a week, maybe. That leaves plenty of time for this person to do mobility work or flexibility work if they have a specific activity that they think they need the work in.
Or a golf practice.
But I'm just saying, but even if it's golf, and even if they, if you're training for strength once or twice a week, that leaves a lot of time that you can do some of these mobility things if the person needs them. That type of program, NASM has a very elaborate personal trainer program, but they tend to equally weight every possible, Some people work at a desk and they're not over, their posture's fine. Maybe they just intuitively stretch during the day. So I think a lot of those programs try to give you a recipe for every possible eventuality. And then there's a continuum within that recipe, right? First we're going to do one-leg bridges, then we're going to do two-leg bridges, now we're going to do two-leg bridges on a ball, now we're going to do two-leg bridges with an extra weight, now we're going to do two-leg bridges with an elastic band. Some of those things are just progressions. There's no magic to any one of those exercises. But I think that's on a case-by-case basis, right? If the person says, I'm having trouble doing the swing the way the instructor's teaching me, then you could pick it apart. But the answer is not necessarily weight training.
Right. And the limitation could be weakness, but it could be a mobility thing. It could be a whole bunch of things. It could be just their mechanics are just off.
And it could just be that it's a bad sport for them.
Right.
Like maybe the postural issue. The one thing with postural issues, if you get them when the person's young, you might be able to correct them. You get a person, 60, 70.
Yeah.
It may have settled into the actual joints. The joints actually may have changed shape.
Yeah, we got people with kyphosis all the time, and we're like, we're not going to reverse that kyphosis. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have these women that I find it a lot with tall women, right? They grow up taller than everyone else in their class, and they're shy, so they end up being kyphotic because they're shy to stand up tall.
Right.
You can't. I've never been able to. You can prevent further degeneration and further
maybe
kyphosis.
at 20 or 25, if you catch that. Maybe they can train out of it. But if you get it when it's already locked in, that's all you can do is not do more damage.
Yeah.
So a lot of people feel and argue that machines are great if you want to just do really high intensity, get really deep, and go to failure. But if you want to really learn how to use your body in space, then free weights and body weight movements need to be incorporated, and both are important. Going to failure with, say, machines in a safe manner that might be cammed properly, but that in and of itself is not enough. That a lot of people feel for full fitness or conditioning, if you will, you need to use free weights or body weight movements.
Yeah, some people even think that machines are bad and only body weight should be done.
Yeah, so do you have an opinion about whether one's better than the other, they both serve different purposes and they're both important, or if you just use either one of them correctly, you're good?
Well, let's talk about the idea that free weights are more functional than machines. I personally think it's what you do with your body that makes it functional or not. And by functional, let's talk
about that. Let's talk about functional training.
I'm half mocking that phrase.
All right. So all right. So let's, before we even go into the question I just asked, maybe we can talk about this idea of, because people are throwing around the expression functional training nowadays. So CrossFit is apparently functional training. So what exactly was functional training?
Well, see, I don't know what they're talking about.
What has it become?
I don't know what they're talking about. Because frankly, if I got to move a tire from point A to point B, I'm rolling it. I'm not flipping it. All right, so I don't.
Yeah, that would be more functional, wouldn't it?
You would think. And if I got to lift something, if I have to lift something, if I have a child or a bag of groceries I have to lift, I'm not going to lift a kettlebell or a dumbbell awkwardly to prepare for that awkward lift. In other words, I would rather train my muscles safely, and then if I have to do something awkward, hopefully I'm strong enough to get through it, to withstand it.
Right.
My thought was, like when I started in 1982 or so, 84, 83, somewhere in the early 80s I started as a trainer.
So old.
Most of us at the time were very influenced by the muscle magazines. So it was either the muscle magazines or the Nautilus one set to failure type training. But the people we were training in the early 80s, especially in Manhattan, they weren't bodybuilders and they weren't necessarily athletes. So to train business people and celebrities and actors, etc., like you would train an athlete seemed like a bad idea. Plus, how many times did I hear, "Oh, I don't want to get big," or "I'm not going out for the Olympics." Okay, fine. So, but then getting to what Mike was saying before, if someone has a hunched over shoulder or whatever, now you're tailoring the training to what the person is in front of you, right? To what's relevant to their life. If 20-inch arms didn't fascinate them, why are you training them to get 20-inch arms, right? Maybe a trimmer waist was more their priority. So to my eye, functional training and personal training back in the 80s was synonymous. Somewhere since the 80s, functional training turned into this anti-machine approach. And, Functional Training for Sport was a book written by a guy named Mike Boyle. His main point in there is, and I'm paraphrasing, so if I get it wrong, don't blame him.
We'll forgive you.
Don't blame him. But his point was, as an athlete, you don't necessarily need to bench heavy or squat heavy or deadlift heavy, although it might be helpful. But you do need the muscles that hold your joints together to be in better shape. So all of his exercises were designed around rotator cuff, around the muscles around the spine, muscles around the hips, muscles around the ankles. Mm-hmm. So in his eye, it was functional for sport. He was training people doing exercises so that they would hold their posture together so that wouldn't cause a problem on the field. And that material was pretty good. Went a little overboard, I think, in some ways, but generally it was pretty good. But then it got kind of bastardized as it got caught into the commercial fitness industry, and it just became an excuse for sequencing like a lunge with a curl, with a row, with a push-up, to another lunge, to a squat. It just became sort of a random collection of movements justified as being functional. Functional for what? Right? At least Boyle said it was functional for sport. His point was to cut injuries down in sport. Where's the function in stringing together, again, a curl to a press to a push-up to a squat, back to the curl, like one rep of each? Those are more like stunts or feats of strength than they are, to me, exercise.
I agree. So, when you talk about the muscles around the spine or the rotator cuffs, they're commonly known as stabilizer muscles.
Yes.
And when we talk about free weights versus machines, a lot of times I'll say something like, if you want to work your stabilizer muscles, you need to use free weights, because that's how you work to stabilize the muscles. What would you say to that?
And I would say is, if they're stabilizing while they're using the free weights, then they're using the stabilizing muscles, right?
And if they're stabilizing while you're using a machine?
They're using the stabilizer
So could
muscles.
you work out those stabilizer muscles of the shoulder on a machine chest press the same way you can use strengthen and stabilize the muscles of the shoulder on a free weight bench press?
It's what your body is doing that counts, not the tool. So if someone's on a free weight...
Is it the same, though? Is it doing it the same way? So you can do it both ways, but is it the same?
Well, if you want to... Skill is very specific. So if you want a barbell bench press, you have to barbell bench press. Because
is there an advantage to your stabilizer muscles to do it with a free weight bench press as opposed to a
I don't see it.
Machine.
I don't see it other than to help the ability to free weight bench press. But if that's not why the person's training, if the person is just training for
strength,
the health benefits of exercise, to use it broadly, I don't think it matters if you stabilize. If you're on a machine chest press and you're keeping your shoulder blades down and back, and you're not buckling your elbows, and you're tightening, you're voluntarily controlling the range of motion. I don't see how that stabilization is different than if you're on a barbell bench press.
And you have to stabilize the same way.
Doing the same way. And that's if you're doing that.
Because you're balancing, because you both arms have to work independently in a way. And you're balancing.
See, to me, that just makes it risky. That doesn't add.
What about like in contrast to, let's say, push-up, a body weight push-up. Obviously, there's a lot more going on because you're holding into a plank position, which incorporates so many more muscles of your entire body.
Right.
But, like Adam, even we were talking the other day about, the feeling, if you're not used to doing push-ups regularly, which, Adam would usually, he's all about machines and stuff like that. I do a little bit of everything, but, slow protocol. But it's different. One of our clients, he is unbelievably strong on all of the machines. We're talking like top 10% in weight on everything. Hip abduction, leg press, chest press, pull downs, everything. And this guy could barely do 8 limited range of motion squats with his body weight, and he struggles with slow push-ups, like doing 5 or 6 push-ups at 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up to 90 degrees at the elbow. He's not even going past. My point is he's working exponentially harder, despite he's only dealing with his body weight, than he is doing on the machines in all categories.
So here's the thing, though. Unless that's a thing with him that I have to be able to do 100 push-ups or whatever, what's the difference?
The difference is, I understand
the question is why, though? Why could he
is the person
lift
training?
400, 500 pounds on a Med-X chest press?
Oh, I'll
but
tell
can
you-
hardly
I'll-
do a couple of push-ups.
I'll tell you why.
And
Because
should he be doing push-ups now because we discovered some kind of weakness that he needs to work on
yes,
push-ups?
but it's not in his pecs and his shoulders.
yeah, I'm going to agree with exactly.
It's not in his, the weakness is probably in his trunk. Like, I don't know what the guy's built like. The weakness is in his trunk because if in a push-up, you're suspending yourself between your toes and your arm.
But somebody should probably be doing ab work. Should be doing the lower back
No, you
extension.
should be doing push-ups.
Right.
You should be practicing push-ups. But practicing in a way that's right, not doing the push-up and hyperextending his back, or doing his push-up with his butt in his air. No. Do a perfect push-up, and then if your form breaks, stop, recover, do another perfect push-up, because we're getting back into things that are very, very specific. So, for instance, if you told me he was strong on every machine, and he comes back every weekend, he's constantly pulling things in his back, then I would say, yes, you have to address it.
Right. Something. This is my observations are more or less about. I think there's something to do with his coordination and the way he's not comfortable in his own body. You know what I'm saying? I mean, for example, his hips turn out like significantly. Like he can't put his feet parallel on the leg press, for example. And then so if I ever had him do like a limited range of motion lunge, even his feet go into very awkward positions. So I could tell he struggles with balance. He's an aspiring golfer as well. His coordination is, his swing is really, I hope he never listens to this, it's horrible.
You're not naming
exactly.
You're not giving his name out.
See, here's the thing now. So you as a trainer have to decide, am I going to reconfigure what he's been doing at the risk of making him feel very incompetent and getting very discouraged? Or do I just want to, instead of doing a machine chest press, say we'll work on push-ups? Do you just want to introduce some of these new things that he's not good at, dribble them out to him a little at a time, so it gives him, so it's like a new challenge for him? Or is that going to demoralize him? Is he going to say, forget this?
He's not demoralized at all. That is not even on the table. I understand what you're saying, and there are other people who I think would look at it that way. He is. I think he looks at it as a new challenge. I think he knows. Like we've discussed this very, very openly. He definitely. It feels like he doesn't have control over his body, in a way. Despite his level, his strength, it's like I feel that.
But that's
to me, my instincts as a trainer were like I want to see this guy be able to feel like he's strong, doing something that is a little bit more. Incorporates his body in space more than just being on a machine, and because his strength is if I'm measuring his strength based on what he can do by pressing forward or pulling back or squatting down, he's passed the test with A's, right. And great form, and he does all the other exercises with pretty good form, but he's struggling with them. He has to work a lot harder in order to do it. And it's just, to me, it's an interesting thing to see someone who lifts, very heavy weights on the chest press and could barely do 4 slow push-ups.
All right, so let's look at the push-up from a different angle. Take someone who can do push-ups, adequately, strictly and all, and to have somebody, have another adult sit on their butt, okay? all of a sudden those perfect push-ups, even though you probably raw strength could bench press an extra body person, say, can't do it. Because somebody who's thicker in the hips, right, has more weight around the hips, represented by the person sitting on their back, their dimensions is such that their hips are always going to be weighing them down. So that person's core, like so a person with broader hips, in order to do push-up, their core has to be much stronger than somebody with very narrow hips because they have less weight in the middle of their body. So some of these things are a function of proportion.
I know, like men and women.
In other words, you
women
can't train for it. In other words, you can't improve it.
You can't train around it.
Right. I know like women have their center of gravity in general in their hips, and that's why push-ups are very, very strong.
Extremely strong individuals. A perfect example of what you're talking about right now. So I know people that are extremely, extremely strong, but some of these very, very strong individuals can do a lot of weight on a pullover machine. They can do a lot of weight on a pull-down machine. But as soon as you put them on a chin-up bar, they can't do it. Does that mean they're not strong? Does that mean that they can't do chin-ups, that they should be working on chin-ups because we discovered a weakness? No. These people, for example, might have shitty tendon insertions.
Yeah,
they, like you said about body weight and center of gravity, if they have really thick, heavy lower body, I noticed that people that have big, thick lower bodies, really strong people.
Or if they have long arms.
Or if they have really long arms.
Right.
The leverage is a complete
the lever
change.
is different.
And so it begs the question, well, let's start doing chin-ups and you'll get better. But you'll never proportionally get better than chin-ups given your proportions, given your tendon insertions, given your length of your arms. So maybe, Mike, this person is just not built to do push-ups, and you're essentially just giving him another chest and body exercise that's not necessarily going to improve or help anything because it's a proportional thing, it's a leverage thing.
Now, the only way you're going to know, though,
especially if you're telling me that he's so strong and everything else.
The only way you're going to know, though, is to try it.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what I've been doing, and we just started it maybe in the last month, and frankly, both of us are excited by it. He's been here for a few years, and I think he also is starving to do something a little new.
Novelty is.
I think that's a piece of the puzzle as well, because even if you're coming once a week and you get results, it gets a little stale. Yep. And the thing is, and that's what I've tried to make an effort of making all of the exercise we're doing, congruent, joint friendly. No limited, very limited range of motion. And the thing is, he's embracing the challenge and he's feeling it too. He's like, how people, I know the deal with soreness and stuff like that, new stimulus, not, joint friendly.
No, in that case, the feel counts, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Feel isn't, it doesn't always mean something good. It doesn't always mean something bad. In that case, it does.
It is a little bit of a marketing thing, if you're trying
keeping the person excited.
Well, not marketing. This is a motivator.
That's right. Motivating.
There's nothing to be ashamed of for motivation. If push-ups is motivating this guy, then do push-ups. They're a great exercise, regardless.
But now, getting back to your general question about whether free weights lend itself to stabilizing the core better or not. If that's what the person is doing on the exercise, then it is. So if the person's doing the push-up and is very tight, yes, he's exercising his core. If the person's doing the push-up and it's sloppy, one shoulder's rising up, one elbow's to the side.
It doesn't matter that it's a push-up. He's still not doing it right. He's still not working his core.
That's right. So it's really what the person's using their body, how they're using the body determines whether they're training their core appropriately, not the source of the resistance.
And I'm sorry. I mean, I've done compound rows with free weights in all kinds of ways over the years, and now I'm doing compound row with a retrofitted Medix machine with a cam that really is represent pretty good cam design. And I challenge anyone to think that they're not working everything they need to work on that machine, because you got to keep your shoulders, still got to keep your shoulders down. You still got to keep your chest up. You still have to, not hunch over your shoulders when you're lowering the weight. I mean, there's a lot of things you got to do right on a compound machine.
That's right.
Just like if you're using free weights. And I don't personally, I've never really noticed much of a benefit. And how would you measure that benefit anyway? Like, how would you be able to prove that free weights is helping in one way where a machine's not? How do you actually prove something like that? Because I hear it all the time. You need to do it because you need to be able to support
there's
yourself.
one measuring thing actually. Bill, you answer.
I was going to say, but a lot of claims in exercise a lot of the chain of thought goes like this. You make the claim, the result, and there's this big black box in the middle that, there's no explanation of why doing this leads to this.
Sure.
If you say the claim and the result turns out, then yes, then it's correlated, and that's therefore.
See, I was going to say,
tricky.
getting to like CrossFit and boot camp type things, and even following along a DVD program, whatever brand name you choose. The problem I have with that from a joint-friendly perspective is you have too many moving parts for you to be managing your posture and taking care of your joints. So especially if you're trying to keep up with the kettlebell class. I mean, I imagine it's possible that you can do certain kettlebell exercises and protect your lower back and protect your shoulders. It's possible, but what the user has to decide is how likely is it, right? So I know for me personally, I can be as meticulous as I want with a kettlebell or with a barbell deadlift, and at some point I'm going to hurt myself. Not from being over ambitious, not from sloppy form. Something's going to go wrong. Somebody else might look at those two exercises and say, no, I'm very confident I can get this. So, you pay your money, you take your chance.
As a measuring tool, sometimes you never know if one's better or worse. But sometimes, every once in a while, even when you have clients come into our gym, and you have them do everything very carefully with a very, very modest weight, and sometimes people say, Mike, I've never had any knee problems, and my knees are bothering me a little bit, and I think it's the leg press that's been doing it. Ever since we started doing that, I'm feeling like a little bit of a tweak in the knee. I'm feeling it when I go upstairs, something like that. And then, one of the first things I will do is, when did this start? You interview them. You try to, draw some lines or, some hypothesis to what's going on. And obviously there might be some wear and tear in their life that happened. There almost definitely was. And maybe something about their alignment on the leg press is not right. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're completely wrong. But one of the things I'll do first is say, okay, well, we still want to work your legs. We still want to work your quads and your hamstrings and your glutes. Let's try doing some limited range of motion squats against the wall or with a TRX or something like that. And then, hey, how are your knees feeling over the last couple of weeks? Actually, much, much better ever since we stopped doing the leg press, And
sometimes some movements just don't agree with some joints.
It reminds me of there's a Nautilus tricep machine that I used to use. It was like kind of like
the one up here.
Yeah, and you do a karate chop, right? And your elbows are stabilized on the pad, and I'd karate chop down. It was an old Nautilus machine, and I got these sharp pains on my elbows. No one else that I trained on that machine ever had that sharp pain in their elbows, but it bothered the hell out of my elbows. Yeah. So I would do other tricep extensions with ever a problem. So, does it make that a bad exercise?
Well,
for me,
but for you it did. But if you notice, certain machine designs have disappeared. Mm-hmm.
We're talking about.
There's a reason why those machine designs disappeared. Yeah. So there's a reason why. I think in the Nitro line,
I know
the machine you're talking about. They used to call it like a multi-tricep, right?
I think so.
Okay, and it held your upper arms were held basically parallel. And you had to kind of karate chop the handles down.
So
and
it wasn't accounting for the carrying angle.
Your elbows weren't. Well, I'll get to that. Your elbows were slightly above your shoulders, and you had to move your elbows in a parallel. Later designs, they moved it out here. They gave them independent axes.
Right.
That's not an accident, right? I mean, a certain amount of ligament binding happens, and then.
Right.
Obviously,
my ligaments were just not coping with that very well.
That's right, and how much. So, for instance, exactly what joint angle your ligaments bind at is individual, but if you're going in this direction, there is a point where the shoulder ligaments bind, and you have to do this. Well, that machine forced us in the bound position.
Yeah.
So when movement has to happen, it can't happen at the shoulder because you're pinned in the seat. It was happening in your elbow. Might not be the same with everybody,
sure was.
But that is how the model. Yeah. How the model works.
So getting back to your client with the leg press, I mean that leg press just
Well, the thing is,
you can play with different positions.
I'm trying to
too.
like
You can
decipher
move
some
their
of like the try to find where the issues may be. Oftentimes, I think it's the client's probably just there's maybe some alignment issues. IT bands are tight or something like that, or maybe there's a weak vas medial. There could be a lot of different little things, but the machines are perfect and symmetrical, but you aren't.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And you're trying to put your body that's not through a pattern, a movement pattern, that has to be fixed in this plane.
Right.
When your body kind of wants to go a little to the right, a little to the left, a little to the right, or something like that. It just wants to do that, even though you're still extending and flexing. In my mind, and through some of the literature that I've explored, has made me think, I don't have the answer, but I'm thinking something along the lines is we're working with this person's issues. I still want them to be able to do a squat or a leg press in this fashion or that fashion. This is where they got some knee pain. This is where they didn't. I don't know exactly what the cause is or whatever, but no pain, exercise okay. Pain, exercise not okay. And that's kind of where I've directed those types of things.
Well, and I think that's where a lot of attempts at franchising one right way to exercise where it falls, right? It fails, whether it was curves where the attendees had to fit into those machines or they couldn't exercise, or go back in the 80s when you used to have Nautilus fitness centers all over the place, but it was one set to failure, no rest, everything, it was cookie cutter. And it doesn't really catch because nobody has perfectly fluid joints that can fit into everything. So in our type of environment where it's ultimately personal training, we feature machines, but it's personal training. We at least have the option to say, okay, if this hurts, we're going to try an alternate. We're going to work the same muscles in the same joint. We'll just find the way that doesn't hurt. I don't see that you're losing anything of it.
Right.
I'm also not selling the equipment. Right, so
right.
That is what I'm selling, is that service of saying, okay, well, if this hurts, we have an alternative that maybe doesn't hurt, and you're going to get the same benefit.
Yeah, from my experience, that's the thing with our business. I think what we all do, I think quite well, is that it's understanding that we have basic movements. We know what we want to do to strengthen the quads, to strengthen the chest, to strengthen the shoulders. But there are some customizations and some things we have to consider when we take a new client or an existing client over time and work with what's going on. And there's psychological things. There's so many different things to take in.
Now I do think though that one thing that was better in the early '80s is because we had all these Nautilus fitness centers around with the one right way to work out. Even though that didn't catch, I noticed the trainers who came through that system, you had a common vocabulary that you could work off of. So at Sports Training Institute, which was around at the time, we would get trainers from those types of Nautilus fitness centers, and it was like that was sort of like the default workout, one set to failure, full range of motion on this machine. But if the client didn't like going to failure, or if the machine didn't agree with them, it would take us, we had the option of doing what we do now. Trainers today, people coming out of school today, or even with multiple certifications, there's a definite, to me, there's like a lack of, it's like the anything goes school of exercise, right? If I call it an exercise, it's an exercise. There's no common vocabulary. So a young trainer will come in the studio and see that I have a kettlebell. He's, oh, great, I'm going to do this. No, you're not. No. The kettlebells hold the door open. That was for experimentation. That was for experimentation only, and I was the guinea pig. No, we do not do that with clients. There's too much of an anything goes mentality. Like, just because some physical labor you did makes you breathless and makes you sweat, makes your muscles burn, and pumps you up, doesn't necessarily make it a good idea.
Right.
And that, I think, is very common among newer trainers. And I sound like definitely sound like an old.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There's a I think younger, newer trainers, they get high off of selling themselves as someone who's going to kill you, and they want their client to tell their friends, "Oh my God, you got to meet my trainer. He just beat the shit out of me. Oh my God!" And
personally, I think that is more of a turnoff than they realize.
Yeah, it's a very immature way of.
There's a reason why. Like I don't know about the city, but there's Planet Fitnesses all over the place by me, and I judiciously ride by them during some peak hours, and the parking lots are full, and it's a much more low key. Now, granted, maybe the quality of I don't really know what they're doing inside. I'm going to assume it's not entirely vigorous based on their marketing.
Spend the $10 and find out. Yeah.
But the thing is, there's a reason why people join health clubs in January and drop out the rest of the year. Something isn't connecting, and I really think that hard-ass presentation is part of it.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a great discussion.
Well, thank you.
You came, we're in Manhattan right now, and Bill came all the way from New Jersey.
Central New Jersey, as a matter of fact.
Where?
Central New Jersey, Cranberry, New Jersey.
Where is that?
Near exit 8A off the turnpike. What exit? What exit? Yeah.
What exit? That's the
So I have a little.
It's
student
1
there.
mile off that exit.
As a matter of fact, it is much smaller than you guys have. I have 800 square feet, approximately a line of Nautilus.
Yeah.
With other things, a couple of cardio pieces, mainly to say I have it, and if I can do one worthwhile thing with it, I'll use it, like a heavy rope. That's kind of a silly piece of exercise equipment, to be blunt. But I figured out one exercise I can do that's not going to hurt people, that seems to work. So just to have it for variety and novelty, we have it. And I have a Swiss ball, a medicine ball, and various items, again, just for the novelty.
Well, so do we, by the way.
So the difference between what we do
intervals on an exercise bike.
is virtually nothing compared to what we do, what any
What's
of us
out
do,
there,
compared to, the boot camps and.
Yeah. No, the key is time efficient and safe.
Maybe we should invite some of those people on our podcast.
Sure.
People that completely think what we're doing is bullshit, and see what they have to say. If they dare walk into our space.
It is interesting because the exercise industry has created this. They've created this structure that I don't think I kind of think is a house of cards. Like, it appears to have a lot of substance to it, but if you can't apply it to most people who walk in your door, what good is it? And that's kind of why I got away from NSCA type stuff and heavy industry stuff. And
Let me tell you, but you say that, but CrossFit is very popular, from my understanding.
And there's a lot of trend toward
and
boutique.
Barry's boot camp
There's a lot of boutique fitness centers now.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
I know
Yeah.
a private equity company bought out Barry's boot camp, and
listen, I'm not giving investment advice, but I'm talking about as far as.
So you're shorting it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but something.
He is giving
again,
investment advice.
No,
Sure.
but if you talk to people in any of these boot camp things by us, everybody's banged up.
Oh yeah.
And all the physical therapists we have here, they say their business is fantastic because of CrossFit.
See, and those things, things like that normalize getting injured in exercise. But it's just like politics, right? If you say something outrageous, everything up to outrageous gets normalized, even though that stuff's outrageous.
Right. Yeah.
So if
like low carb diet, I'm eating 100 grams of carbs a day, and that's considered a low carb diet. Well, yeah, compared to the average American diet of 500 carbs a day. But 100 grams of carbs is not that low.
Jamie, in my 6:30 on Tuesday morning, he said a girl in his office, is hurt. Their low back is hurt, and she can't wait to get back to CrossFit when her back feels better.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable. Like, we were like, what?
See, again, they've normalized getting injured as part of exercise.
Oh, sure. Well, forever it's been no pain, no gain. Forever.
But the thing is, the thing is,
No,
like,
but
things
you know
like,
something? I think Jones in the early days of Nautilus, granted there was some excessive, we overtrained and trained too hard and stuff like that, but there was a little more of Darden's books and stuff like that, there was a little more awareness of the exercise itself not causing new problems.
well, then at the time, as you said in your books, in your pamphlets, it was all about bodybuilders at the time. People now, like, everybody thinks, yeah, I got to go to the gym. I got to get fit. I got to, my cardio, my heart disease. I got to make sure I'm healthy for my kids and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's like, it's everywhere now, and everybody feels they have to participate in getting exercise, whether they do it or not.
But see, that person really can't justify getting hurt at exercise.
I
got to stay healthy for my kids, so I'm going to trash my back and my rotator cuff.
I know. But the thing is, that's
we have a lot of work
that's
to
a
do.
separate thing. But the thing is, the CrossFit thing. It's amazing that the community and the cult, like they just can't wait to be back. At their next session, which was yesterday. Which is tomorrow. And the relatively very intense classes or.
But I don't
sessions
know.
and
I haven't
stuff.
met too many people that have been doing CrossFit for years.
Not too many old CrossFitters.
There aren't, not too many people doing CrossFit for years. I've been doing CrossFit for 2 years. I've been doing CrossFit
I have a
for
client
3
right
years.
now who does it every weekend, and he's got a lot of problems. By the way, it's unbelievable. Shoulder problems, back problems.
See, I cannot relate to that guy's thinking at all.
I honestly like that. Here's the thing: going back to like connecting with every time someone tells me they're going to do their boot camps or whatever, I'm like, listen. Be very mindful about what you're doing I'm trying. I never want to say
Don't do it.
Don't do it
because
I used to do that, and I saw that people they stopped listening to me immediately, and now I'm just trying to.
Worse, they stop coming to you.
Well, it's I've wrestled with that for many years, and now I just try to encourage mindfulness, and some people they listen, and other people are like. They just keep on going. Mike, you're gonna kill me, man. I went to the fitting room again, and oh man, it was crazy.
We also get misrepresented and misunderstood when, for example, I've heard recently even that some people were like, I like that Informed Fitness. I like the concept of that once a week high intensity workout, but I like working out every single day. So I don't know. I don't know if that's for me because I'd rather work out every single day, as if it's a mutually exclusive decision. And
Right.
what I like to say is, and that's not where we stand. That's not what we say. We say, if you do this, don't do anything else in your life. What we're saying is, all you need is one really highly intense workout per week, and then do all your other things if you like doing all those other things. If you'd like to get on a treadmill and burn off some steam every single day, then do so. But do so in moderation, do so carefully, and understand the risks associated with that. But you don't have to not do it. What you need to be careful of is not overdoing too many really super duper intense workouts. Right. That's what we're really saying.
Yeah, there needs to be space. Exactly. Space. If you're doing intense yoga or intense boxing, it's like there needs to be more space in between your weight training and those types of things.
Well, I probably, especially over the summers, quote, work out every day. I'm still only using the weights once a week.
Yeah.
Well, that's
But,
the thing.
Same
but every
same
day
with
I'm
me.
either on a bike or I'm doing a fast walk with the dog.
You're
or
recreating, man. You're living.
You know.
Nothing wrong with getting your heart pumping. Who knows?
Honestly, I've been encouraging, I do this myself. I use lacrosse ball. I really have no pains on my body, but I do little lacrosse ball stuff on my hips and my low back, like foam roller type of things.
Yep.
And then some mobility exercises, like some pelvic tilts and I like some glute bridges and bird dogs, that type of thing. And I've with some of my clients who are very, very tight on a regular basis or feel their lower back tightness, I just try these things. They're relatively innocuous. It doesn't feel like much, but I teach them how to do it, and almost all of them are reporting, Mike, I've been doing it for a few weeks, and I feel a little bit better. And I mean, and it like a little relief from the general strain. And I think that's the type of stuff I like to encourage on a daily basis. Keep their mind on their body. And
Well, I notice you have Pilates on the door.
yep.
I really think once a week, high intensity, whether it's machines or free weights, and a discipline like a Pilates or a yoga, or even just, if you want to use a non-branded term, the mobilization exercises.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly the right combination as far as staying healthy and being physically capable as we get older.
Right.
That's exactly the right combination, right? The days of heavy lifting 3 times a week.
So there you go. If we stood for,
You wouldn't have that stuff
we
here.
wouldn't have an acupuncturist here, a Pilates instructor here. We
Right.
wouldn't have a massage therapist here. It's not one size fits all, number one. And they're two different things. This is high intensity exercise to get you as strong as hell in as safe as manner possible. And then, like you said, mix it in with some of these more body
our
awareness
Pilates
things.
instructor
like
thinks what we do here is fantastic. She we have a lot of clients between both of us. It's fantastic.
Bill, thank you so much for coming here. I hope you would come back. I mean, there's so much more to talk about. Would you come back for some
Of course
more?
I will. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bill. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, did you get all that? Hope you did. If not, give it another listen. Valuable content here regarding high-intensity training safely with Bill DeSimone, Mike Rogers, and Adam Zickerman. Hey, check out the show notes for a few links that will assist you in building muscle, burning fat, and recharging your metabolism safely. You'll find a link to Bill DeSimone's book, Congruent Exercise, How to Make Weight Training Easier on Your Joints. Of course, if you haven't picked up Adam's book yet, Power of 10, the once-a-week slow-motion fitness revolution, you might want to add that to your cart in Amazon along with Bill's book. To find an Inform Fitness location nearest you, visit informfitness.com. At the time of this recording, we have locations in Manhattan, Long Island, Denville, Burbank, Boulder, Leesburg, and Reston. Adam, Mike, and Sheila are awaiting your comments and questions regarding the Power of 10. Send them an email or record a voice memo on your phone and shoot it on over to podcast@informfitness.com. You can also leave a voicemail by calling 888-983-5020, extension 3. Thanks again for listening to the Inform Fitness Podcast. For Adam, Mike, Sheila, and Bill DeSimone, I'm Tim Edwards with the Inbound Podcasting Network.